Hi, I'm John Olczyk. I'm a senior principal analyst and fellow at the Enterprise Strategy Group, and I'm honored to have my good friend and colleague, Candy Alexander, joining me. Hi, Candy.
Hi, John. And I am, of course, Candy Alexander, International President of the ISSA.
Great. So we are presenting, and this is on the ESG ISSA research, the life and times of cybersecurity professionals. We're not strangers here. We've done this several years in a row, and this is our fifth annual project. This year we had 489 completed, and these are ISSA members and ISSA partners. Candy will go into that. These are security professionals from all types of organizations, small, medium, and large, international. We don't have the numbers here, but we will have them in the final report, and we don't filter by industry. So we have lots of different industries represented in the final report. We'll also look at any of the statistical significant things that we find in different industries. So Candy, what did I miss?
So I just want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our partners at ISSA who helped provide the responses. So those partners are CSA, or Cloud Security Alliance, SANS, IAPP, and the EC Council. So again, thank you very much for your help and participation, for it really needs to be a cyber security professional response. So thanks.
Yeah, I concur, Candy. We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you so much. It really does make this a worthwhile project to have your participation. So here is the RSA equation, and our intent is to educate our audience. We hope that you can learn from what we're doing, and we really hope that you can take this data, which we really have a lot of pride in, and apply it to your personal career. And so let me go into that more specifically. How can you apply this research? So if you're a cybersecurity professional, you're getting feedback on what your peers are thinking. So compare where you are to where they are, and then assess your opportunities and where do you need to spend some time, where are you doing very well, what insights can you gather from your peers. If you're a senior executives, you get to understand what the mindset is of your employees. So kind of what are they thinking of? How satisfied are they with their career? Where are they struggling? Where do they need help? And really important for cybersecurity is how can you retain them? How can you make them happy? And then if you're a cybersecurity vendor, these are your customers speaking. Your customers are going through a lot of stress. It's a stressful job. So how can this data help you relate better to them? And if you can relate better to them, you can probably build better relationships. So Candy, what's your thought here?
So my little add to this is that if you are, either a cyber professional, individual contributor, or a manager in an organization, look for the golden nuggets, because they are in here, as to help providing justification back to either HR or business executives or management for justification for either additional training dollars or resources. So we will attempt to offer those pointers as we go through this presentation.
Good point. Okay, so let's get into the research. This was a new question for this year. It was really driven by a focus group that Candy and I did with 5 different cybersecurity professionals at all levels of their careers. So we wanted to understand how they found their current jobs. And what you see on the right side of this is kind of old school job hopping kind of stuff, where either I found a job that was posted by the organization or I was contacted by the recruiter. The key takeaway to me, Candy, is the high percentage of people, the biggest percentage, said it's networking with industry contacts. Now, if I'm an entry-level person, that's not possible. But once I've established myself, I am going to go and look for those opportunities where I've worked with people I know, I work with people I like, I work with people I can learn from. And this is a bit self-serving because networking with industry contacts is what you do at ISSA, but it's clearly working, Candy.
It is. It is. And, you know, I would counter that point that, yes, it's difficult for entry level, but there's no reason why they can't. You know, get involved in your local communities. There's tons of meetups, security meetups. Go to an ISSA chapter meeting locally or now virtually, and or get involved in any of these professional organizations like CSA, OWASP. I mean, it's just amazing how many resources are out there. Start talking to people.
And Candy, with ISSA, you have special programs for entry-level people and people who are trying to get into their careers, correct?
Absolutely. If there's anything that I hear as a common message throughout ISSA memberships, is that ISSA members want to give back to the profession, and that means help grow the next generation coming in. So, you know, if you are an entry level person, not yet in the profession, start talking to folks. They want to help you.
That's a wonderful message from ISA to the community. In this one, this is a repeat from last year, but it's really important to hammer this home. So we asked these 400 plus cybersecurity professionals, how long does it take to become proficient? And what you see here is that the bulk of people that we surveyed think it's somewhere between 2 years and 5 years. So it's a lifelong commitment. It's a lifelong profession. And Candy, I always equate it with being a physician. If you become a physician, you've gone to medical school, that doesn't stop your education. You have to continually keep up with different medical innovations, different research, and it's the same for cybersecurity.
Absolutely, if not more so, because I mean, you look at our world today, everything's based on technology. And, you know, years ago when I first got into technology, I was told technology back in the 1800s, even first part of the 1900s, they changed every 50 years, technology innovations. You look at what's happening today, it's changing yearly, monthly. It's just insane. And everything we do in the cyber, you know, realm is, you know, to support that technology. So how else can we keep up with what's going on in technology if we aren't constantly learning? And, you know, we're not even talking about mastering. So, you know, when we look at this slide, it's really important to understand, as you mentioned, this is a lifelong investment. And that's why when we talk to cyber professionals, they are all passionate about, you know, learning, and that's what we need, is to continuously learn. It doesn't happen overnight.
No, it does not. So this is new and this is really important. So we asked, again, our panel, what advice would you give to someone who's interested in getting into cybersecurity? And I'll just focus on a couple of things. So get a basic, and the key is basic certification. So get a baseline that will be a requirement. Don't dwell on certifications, which we'll talk about, but get a basic certification. Once again, join a professional industry organization, network with your peers, and then find a mentor. So this has been key in my career in different roles, but find a mentor, just track your progress. People are there to help, Candy.
Absolutely. And, you know, I'll say something, and for those of you who've seen me speak before on this topic, don't get caught into that certification game. You know, again, the whole key is basic cybersecurity certifications. There are 5 that our members constantly say are the top ones to go for that are more valuable. That's CISSP, CISM, CISA, CompTIA Plus, and Certified Ethical Hacker. So, you know, to help you decide which route you want to go, get somebody, you know, who's already in the profession. And as John mentioned, find a mentor. And it's not just one mentor, by the way. I have many mentors according to what my need is for information or knowledge or learning. So, you know, don't get stuck on the traditional, you know, you want to be my mentor, because that doesn't work. Look at the diversity of the knowledge we need, and then the diversity of mentorship to happen to accomplish that.
Good points. And Candy, I know this is really important to you. This is, again, this is something we've looked at in the past, but go ahead.
So again, certifications versus hands-on experience. It's really important to understand the whole purpose of the certifications in the first place, the whole reason why they were developed many years ago, starting with the most notable one, ISC squared and the CISSP, is we as a profession had really no way of articulating what that we have a baseline of knowledge, or what that baseline of knowledge is. So the certifications began with that. It's a means to articulate our starting point of what our experience and knowledge are. But the key is their experience and knowledge. So, don't, again, really, I caution folks to don't go after every certification out there, because that's not going to help you. You can see here through our data that it is experience in conjunction with that certification that's going to give you what you need. So they really are hand in hand.
Good point. This is an important slide, and this is the first time we've done this. And next year, I think we'll go deeper, but we wanted to understand the relationship between security teams and other teams, other functional groups within organizations. Security is a team sport, so this is really important on how these organizations collaborate. Now, we'll go a little bit deeper into the IT relationship and the business relationship, but a couple of things stand out. The fair or poor relationships with people like the board or groups like the board of directors, HR, lines of business. Security needs to be embedded into the organization. We need a culture of cybersecurity. That means the business has to meet us halfway, but that means that security needs to be proactive, Candy.
Absolutely. This has been my soapbox item of this past year. Oftentimes we talk about we need to support the business, we security folks. So we want to teach them about security. Do we really want our CEOs to come to a security conference? Do we really want them to understand the ins and outs of security? I would argue not. We want them to run the business, but we want to be able to have that knowledge-based discussion with them as to what's the business and how can we best support that. When we look at this data, we can most certainly identify those target groups that I would suggest we go and have a conversation with. And the conversation isn't in regards to educating them about security. The conversation is us getting educated as to what their business is. For when we have that conversation, we as the cybersecurity professionals are able to articulate or understand the business risk. And then we are able to mitigate that risk through security measures. So, when we walk in and say, well, we need to, comply with X, Y, or Z, that's the wrong conversation. We need to understand the business so we can understand the risk and then propose the mitigation through security controls. So this is your target list. This is the target list of who you want to talk with.
Well said, Candy. I mean, it's understanding the business process, what data is being used, and like you said, the threat models.
Yes, absolutely, John.
So now this year we were very cognizant of getting, not just understanding the problems, but proposing some solutions. So we asked our panel of cybersecurity professionals, what advice would you give your organization to improve the relationship between cybersecurity and IT? And this is the data that you see. And there's a couple of themes here, Candy, without even going into the data. It's move, shift left, so get security involved earlier in the process. And then it's cross-functionality, if there's such a word. It's under the IT people need to understand security. The security people need to understand IT. They need to work together as a team with common goals and common metrics, not against each other.
Right. And it goes back to the age-old, statement. It's more expensive to bolt security on than bake it in. I mean, we've all heard that. But, what does that really mean? And it does mean shift left. When you look at the different models that are out there from a security maturity perspective, it all states bring us in security, that is, in at the beginning when you're doing your requirements, collection and things like that. So, often in the past couple of years, we've heard the whole thing about DevOps. What is DevOps? That's the combination and expediting of development into operations. So they've, shortened that cycle from an agility perspective. We need to do the same thing from a security perspective. So just as they've shortened the DevOps, to combine those, we need to really incorporate security into that same mentality. And very much so from the cross-functional perspective where, you have, development, you have operations, but also look at it from a quality perspective. We don't look at quality enough. And one could really argue that security is very much a component of quality. So, again, when we look at, making sure, if you will, that all of the bases are covered from an IT project perspective, why wouldn't you incorporate security into that? Because again, when we talked about understanding the business and understanding the risks, this is where we're going to mitigate them through cybersecurity and cybersecurity controls. And that really needs to be a partnership with IT. So it's going to, the need for a paradigm shift, if I might use another cliche, is at the utmost right now. We need to put behind us the us versus them mentality and look at it as a cross-functional team. We each have a part to play.
Very true. And that rings true too when we look at this slide, advice for improving the relationship with business management. Once again, 41% encouraging cybersecurity participation in all business planning and strategy. There's a typo there, but it should say in all business planning and strategy. And again, it's that shifting left. The more we understand about the business planning and strategy, the more that we understand about who's touching the data or who needs access to an application. Is there sensitive data involved? Are we moving that sensitive data to some place where we don't have control of it? Are we using cloud? Are we using SaaS? So the more we know up front, the better we can put together these models, the better cross-functional processes we can define.
Right. When we talk about threat modeling, we have one perception as a security profession. But let's really, understand that we need to understand the business so we can create those threat models for the business and then go back and say, okay, business owners, do you really want to expand into, say, for example, Russia as a business model? Yes, there might be, a high demand for the product service, but let's look at the pros and cons of that. So again, not using security terminology, if you notice, but you're using common lay people's terminology. What are the pros and cons of going to Russia? And then you lay them out and of course, put forth the security controls and costs.
Yeah, time is flying by here, Candy. So let's go on to the next slide. So, and this is data that we've seen year after year, and I called it a cybersecurity training paradox. 91% agree that cybersecurity professionals must keep up with their skills or their organization's at a disadvantage. So 91%, but 59% agree, while I try to keep up on my cybersecurity skills, it's hard to do so given the demands of my job. That's the paradox. Candy, how the heck do we handle that?
So at the beginning of our session here, we talked about, we'll point out the golden nuggets to use for justification. So golden nugget alert, here it is, guys. Take this slide, take this data, use this for justification for your training and or additional resources.
Very true. And understand that your people are under a lot of pressure. They've got a lot of work, and you have to appreciate that they have to have time for training.
Yep.
So this is another one we asked for the first time. It's basically a best practice that you get 40 hours of training per year as a cybersecurity professional. We wanted to see how people were doing versus that 40%. And I think there's good news and bad news here. So There is good news that 54% say I've had more than 40 hours of training. 24% said I've had about 40 hours, but a pretty significant percent say that they haven't had 40 hours of training. So that's concerning to me. And then the other thing is, let's define training. I mean, if you are watching videos or webinars for CPE credit, okay, we understand that you need CPE credit, but that's not training. This is all about really understanding your craft, improving your craft. So I think it's important for cybersecurity professionals to ask themselves that question, Candy.
Absolutely. I'll just say, beware of the infomercial that we've now, adopted with this whole new, COVID-19 pandemic world. Just really pick and choose as to what do you get? What's your value? If it's more than a CPE, do it, because otherwise, sure, put on, that in the background while you're having lunch, but, really look at the value.
It's true. I mean, it's your career, and to that point, we asked the 21% who didn't have 40 hours of training, why? What are the reasons why? And it comes down to, not surprisingly, time and money. So time, 33%, 1/3 said, I don't have enough time. Well, you have to make the time, and as an employer, as a manager, you have to make sure your employees have the time, or you can find the time, because their training, their skill development is equated to your risk and the risk of your business. So that's really important. And then money, some people say, well, my organization doesn't pay for it, so I can't do it. And certainly as an employer, you have to internalize that and understand whether you can fund or change compensation models to fund it. But also as a cybersecurity professional, you have to invest in your career. So sometimes it will cost you, but an investment will pay ROI dividends over time, because you'll become better, you'll be more in demand, you'll make more money, Candy.
I agree. And I mean, you said it all. I have nothing to add.
Sometimes I do that. Not often, but sometimes. So we're going to shift over to the cybersecurity skill shortage. So this is a topic we've covered for years. And Candy, disappointing. 57% still say that they've been impacted by the skill shortage. I don't really understand the 10% who don't know. Maybe they're small organizations, maybe they have multiple jobs, but once again, more than 50% have been impacted by the cybersecurity skill shortage. Those people who have been impacted, we ask them, what's the impact? And there's always these kind of same things every year, Candy. But this year it's more pronounced. So 62% said there's an increasing workload on existing staff. And that's been exacerbated by COVID, by work from home. So that's concerning to me. If I'm CISO, as you are, that's concerning to me, because you can't just pile more work onto people and expect quality work in return. The other thing that's really important here is the percentage of people saying there's a high burnout rate or attrition rate for the cybersecurity staff, 38%. So we're piling more work on people and they're burning out, Candy. That can't be a good recipe for success.
Absolutely not. And I think this is just a sign we really have not identified the solution, and we need to keep working it. And again, just to emphasize, if your organization is not doing for you, you need to do for yourself. So go get that skill that you need, and keep pushing back. Use this information to get additional resources.
Yeah, again, and if you're a manager, this is what your people are going through. So how can you rectify that situation? How can you address it? Has the skills shortage gotten worse, Candy? 44% say yes. And probably the most meaningful statistic on this is that only 5% say it has improved over the past few years. So there's no cavalry riding up to save us. There won't be any massive influx of highly skilled professionals that we can hire. And again, what Candy, you always remind me of this, is the skill shortage isn't just about staffing, it's about skills. Mm-hmm. So if the skill shortage has gotten worse over the past few years, you're probably less able to defend the company, to recognize threats than you were a few years ago.
Right. Absolutely. And, you know, the thing that it's exasperating to me is that it's been getting worse over the past few years. And now, if we're looking at this data since the past year, and it's gotten even worser, then, you know, we need to find a solution. So, yeah.
And again, you can't hope that some external force is going to come in. You have to take this on yourself.
Yep.
So the biggest factors, this is from a cybersecurity professional's perspective, what are the biggest factors contributing to the skills shortage? My organization doesn't offer competitive compensation. Well, that in a seller's market, that's going to kill you every time. So you really can't be cheap here. You have to be able to hire people at a compensation level that's commensurate with what everybody else is paying. It's just, that's the reality of it. But there's a couple of other things that are much more interesting to me because money is always a concern. So the HR department at my organization doesn't understand the skills needed. Well, there's a disconnect there. That means the HR department isn't recruiting well, and it means that there's a disconnect between cybersecurity and HR. My organization's not in an attractive industry for cybersecurity professionals. Well, what can you do to overcome that? Become a cybersecurity center of excellence, perhaps, so that maybe you're not in the right industry, but you're offering the right things for a cybersecurity professional career. And then this one kills me. Job postings are unrealistic. Mm-hmm. And this is what we hear, Candy, from entry-level people is there's an entry-level job posted, but it requires 3 years of experience, a CISSP, maybe other certifications. Just a disconnect there too.
Absolutely. When I look at this data, this very much is a link to the previous, how, you know, it's gotten worse over the past year. So here's my take and my read on this. HR, you're right. They don't understand what we do. Neither does the business, because oftentimes it is the business that says to HR, we need to get a security person. So HR says, okay, you know, what do you need? And it's all compliance driven, right? So again, we collectively who are in the profession, we need to educate the business as to what our job is. What is our job? Our job is to understand the risk of the business and offer mitigation strategies, and then oversee those mitigation strategies through security controls. That includes, compliance. So, you can look at those last three data points and equate it to that. This is our failure as a collective profession to not have educated the business as to what it is we do. And therefore, they don't invest in us. They pick the wrong, job descriptions. They pick bad after bad. They pick a job description on the internet that has absolutely nothing to do with what they really want or what they really need, but they post it anyways because that's what fill in the blank. Acme Medical wanted or Acme Manufacturing wanted. So they must know what they're talking about. So it's bad chasing bad. We need to stop that cycle.
Yeah, and the other thing that you always remind me of is that people need to be more creative, not just look for IT professionals or cybersecurity professionals changing jobs, look outside or think outside the box.
Yep.
So are organizations taking the necessary actions to address the impact of the cybersecurity skill shortage? Candy. 59% said my organization could be doing much more or my organization should be doing somewhat more. So let's hold that thought because we have, I've got one slide and then we'll address that specifically. Mm-hmm. But here are the areas, the acute areas of cybersecurity skill shortages. And Candy, we always see the big three. Cloud computing security, security analytics, or analysis and investigations and application security. And just given what's happened in the last year, work from home, that accelerated a lot of cloud initiatives, digital transformation initiatives. Cloud security came out on top, but all three of those are just acute shortages.
Right.
Okay, now back to my organization isn't doing enough. So we asked people, what could your organization do? And there's some suggestions here. So increase the commitment to cybersecurity training. Candy, we've been dwelling on this, that it's a lifelong pursuit, that organizations need to be sensitive to the training needs of their employees, and that employees need to really jump on training. So this is one thing you can do, is increase your training. Increase compensation, we talked about. Provide incentives for certifications and participation in industry events. You want well-rounded security professionals. And then I'll just stop at this one, but create or improve a cybersecurity internship program. You know, from the ISSA perspective, there just aren't enough internship programs. Yeah. Now, if you bring in interns, let's say you bring in summer interns, they'll turn into full-time employees if they're good. So it becomes a pipeline for you. Now, of course, you have to train, you have to dedicate resources to training junior people, but that creates, again, an influx of talent that you can then train and hopefully retain.
Right. So I think when I look at this slide, what it says to me is that businesses and organizations are just not investing properly or appropriately into the cybersecurity department, if you will. So, you know, that means training, that means, you know, compensation, the feeling of value. So we're talking about basic investment decisions. So taking the time to really look at the compensation, to look at the value add, and it really comes down to, in my opinion, the lack of investment. You know, we talked offline about organizations really are hesitant in providing that investment of training and compensation and, you know, instilling loyalty.
That's very true.
The staff are going to jump ship as soon as they get, you know, whatever training they need or whatever. But I think we really need to stop that cycle as well and realize that, you know, loyalty is based on investment. If I feel valued, then I'm going to, you know, do anything I can for my boss because they appreciate me. So it really needs to, you know, be broken down into the very simple, you know, perspective of investment builds loyalty. Loyalty builds good, skilled people.
So true. Okay, we've got a couple slides left, and I know we're getting short on time. So is the cybersecurity shortage overstated? Candy, I put this one in this year because every time I write about the cybersecurity skill shortage, I get feedback from cybersecurity professionals who say, there's plenty of people out there, we just don't write job requirements or requisitions well, or we don't recruit well. And I would say what this data has told me, Candy, is that both things can be true. There is a pretty acute cybersecurity skills shortage, but at the same time, we're not managing it or addressing it as well as we could, creating those problems. So yeah, some people think it's overstated. Most think it's that the amount of discussion about it's about right.
I agree. It's
okay. And this kind of reinforces that. So how difficult is it to recruit new cybersecurity staff? 76% say it's either extremely difficult or somewhat difficult. So again, people aren't just popping in and with the right skill sets. You have to put the work in to find them, and that costs money, and this reinforces that, Candy.
Absolutely. I have nothing to add, but let's take a look at your next slide, because I think that's going to give us an idea of why recruiting is hard.
Okay, good point. So where is it challenging? Who is it challenging to find? Now, remember, we said that it takes between 2 and 5 years to become a proficient cybersecurity professional. Guess what? Big surprise, Candy. Those are the people that are really difficult to recruit. 71% said those are the difficult people to recruit.
Right. And again, this goes back to bad chasing bad. I mean, how can we get people with experience if our entry-level jobs require 3 to 5 years experience? I mean, that is so ridiculous of a statement. So we really need to look at how we are going to get folks that experience. There's been lots of, ideas shared in regards to that internship, getting folks to volunteer to do security projects through organizations such as CSA, ISSA, and, fill in the blank. So just because you can't get paid for it, or just because you can't make, $100,000 as an entry-level person, is no reason to be deterred. Go, if this is what you want, come after it. It's well worth it, because you will fall into that 71% box really quickly.
Yeah, and two quick things for me, Candy. Once again, this reinforces that the more you put into your career, the more you'll get out of your career, because as you increase your skill set, increase your experience, you're more in demand. Yeah. So you can make the money. So don't think about money up front. You'll make it over time. And the second thing is, if I'm a CISO, retention. What can I do to retain my staff? Because they're in high demand. So if I'm not doing that, someone else is going to grab them. And we know that from other research in this project. So on to the last slide. This is really just wrapping up and repeating what we talked about. There's organizational friction. So we have to get the cybersecurity team involved with IT, with the business, with HR, with legal, much sooner and much more, cross-functionally. The training deficit, we just dwelled on this because it's really a problem, and it's sort of a foundational thing. So CISOs, are you allocating enough time and money to training? As Candy so aptly put it, use this data to justify more budget for training, because your staffers are crying out for more training, and you have higher risk if you don't train them. And the cybersecurity skills shortage is not an illusion. There are some aspects we're not managing well, but it's real, it's impactful. And so you have to look at the data we presented, assess where you're bad or where you're not up to speed. And then, like we said, the cavalry isn't coming. What can you do? And the one other point I'll make I'm stealing Candy's point. It's not just about staffing. It's about skills. And that's the relationship between the skill shortage and training. So Candy, close us out.
I think you said it all. Great summation. And I think, again, it's all up to you, the professional. Get assistance, get guidance, join ISSA, come to a meeting, go to OWASP, go to CSA. There are great professional organizations out there. You're not alone. If you want it bad enough, go get it.
Really well said. And so look forward to more from this research. This is just a taste of the research. There's plenty more. We, ESG and ISSA, will be publishing it. It's available for free. And so thanks for being here. This is our contact information. Candy, it's always a pleasure presenting with you. I always learn a lot. And for the audience, thanks for being here.